My neighbor kept dumping his trash in my yard, snickering, "You have a bigger property, so you can handle a little extra garbage." When I installed cameras and reported him, he screamed, "You're such a bad neighbor." His smug look faded when the HOA announced, "Congratulations, you just earned the largest fine ever issued in this community." Living in a quiet suburban neighborhood in the United States, I always appreciated the peace and space my property provided. With a larger yard than most, it was my personal retreat, a place to relax after long days at work. However, this tranquility was disrupted when my neighbor, Greg, began to intrude upon it. Greg was a middle-aged man who often prioritized his convenience over others. It started subtly. I'd find a stray soda can or fast food wrapper near our property line. Initially, I dismissed it, thinking perhaps the wind had carried the debris. But soon, the occasional litter turned into full garbage bags. One evening, as I was tending to my garden, I noticed Greg casually tossing a bag of trash over the fence into my yard. Approaching him, I said, "Greg, I couldn't help but notice you've been throwing your trash into my yard. Could you please stop?" He smirked and replied, "Come on, you've got a bigger property. A little extra garbage won't hurt." Taken aback, I responded, "It's not about the size of my yard. It's about respect. Please dispose of your trash properly." He chuckled, "Don't be such a stiff. It's just trash." I hoped our conversation would end the matter, but Greg's actions escalated. Not only did he continue to dump his garbage into my yard, but he also began to do so more brazenly, often in broad daylight. Bags of household waste, broken appliances, and even old furniture started appearing on my property. Fed up, I decided to take action. I installed security cameras around my property, ensuring they covered the areas where Greg was dumping his trash. Over the next week, the cameras captured clear footage of Greg's activities. Armed with evidence, I approached the Homeowners Association, HOA. During the next community meeting, I presented the footage to the board. The members were visibly shocked. Mr. Thompson, the HOA president, turned to Greg and said, "Greg, this behavior is unacceptable. We've received multiple complaints about your actions." Greg, looking smug, replied, "Oh, come on. It's just a bit of trash. No big deal." Mr. Thompson's expression hardened. "Actually, it is a big deal. According to our community guidelines, improper waste disposal carries significant penalties." Greg's smirk faded. "Wait, you're serious?" "Very. Given the extent of your violations, the board has decided to impose a fine." Greg scoffed. "How much are we talking about?" Mr. Thompson glanced at his notes. "Considering the repeated offenses and the evidence presented, you've incurred the largest fine ever issued in this community, $5,000. Greg's face turned pale. "You can't be serious." Another board member interjected, "We take the cleanliness and respect among neighbors seriously. Your actions have disrupted the harmony of our community." Greg tried to protest, but the evidence was irrefutable. The board's decision was final. In the following weeks, Greg ceased his dumping activities. He paid the fine, albeit begrudgingly, and our neighborhood returned to its peaceful state. While we never became friends, Greg learned to respect property boundaries, and I regained the tranquility of my home. This experience taught me the importance of standing up for oneself and the value of community regulations in maintaining harmony. It also underscored the significance of respecting one's neighbors and their property. Things got quiet for about a month after the HOA meeting. Greg stopped throwing trash over. I'd see him mowing his lawn or walking to his mailbox, and he wouldn't even look my way. I figured it was over. I kept the cameras up just in case, but I relaxed a little. Then weird things started happening. First, my garbage bins were tipped over in the middle of the night. Not once or twice, this happened 5 times in 2 weeks. I thought maybe it was raccoons or wind at first, until I checked the camera footage. Sure enough, Greg was sneaking over at around 3 a.m., pushing the bins over, then jogging back like some kind of petty criminal. I took the footage to the HOA again. They said they'd issue him a warning, since the fine had already been the highest on record. But I could tell they didn't want to get involved any deeper unless it got worse. It did. One morning, I walked outside to find my garden destroyed. Someone had yanked up the tomato plants, crushed the flower beds, and snapped the small lemon tree I'd planted the previous summer. It looked like someone took their time doing it, not just a quick act of vandalism. This was deliberate. Personal. I checked my cameras again. This time nothing. He was smart. He'd gone around the blind spot. There was a stretch behind my tool shed that the cameras didn't catch. Greg must have figured that out. I didn't go to the HOA this time. I called the police. They came, took photos, and said they'd talk to Greg, but without footage or an eyewitness, they couldn't do much. I knew Greg would deny it. Sure enough, I saw him later that day, casually washing his car, whistling like he didn't have a care in the world. The next night, I moved one of the cameras to cover the blind spot. It wasn't obvious, but it had a good view of the back fence. 3 days later, Greg struck again. This time, he was pouring something from a jug onto the corner of my lawn. I didn't know what it was right away, but the next morning, that patch of grass was brown and dead. He'd poured bleach or some kind of killer onto it. I had the footage. I didn't say a word to him. I just emailed everything, every incident, every video, every photo of damage. To the HOA board, the police, and the neighborhood Facebook group. No comments, no explanations. Just the evidence. The post blew up. People started sharing their own Greg stories. One neighbor said he'd been stealing their Amazon packages and leaving the empty boxes behind their shed. Another mentioned he'd let his dog poop on their lawn and never cleaned it up. A third said she caught him peeking over her fence into her pool. Turns out, Greg wasn't just a bad neighbor to me. He was a problem for the whole block. Nobody spoke up before because it was all little stuff, and Greg had a way of smiling and pretending he didn't know what they were talking about. Now everyone knew. Greg tried to post a defense in the comments, blaming camera tricks and yard sabotage. He accused me of editing videos. People weren't buying it. Then one of the board members messaged me directly. Apparently, Greg had been warned before about other violations. Noise complaints, improper fencing, lawn maintenance issues. My case was the last straw. I was told something big was about to happen. Meanwhile, Greg stopped going outside. No more car washing, no more early morning vent tipping. But I had a feeling he wasn't done. The way he looked at me from his window, that wasn't embarrassment or shame. That was someone planning something. I doubled down. More cameras. Floodlights. I even got one of those doorbell cams that records constantly. I wasn't going to be caught off guard again. Then one night, I woke up around 2 a.m. to a strange buzzing sound. I looked out the window and saw smoke. My tool shed, where I stored all my gardening supplies, was on fire. I ran out with a hose, called 911, did everything I could. The fire department showed up fast, thank God. They stopped it from spreading to the house. But the shed was gone. Tools, lawnmower, everything burned to nothing. They said it looked like arson. And yeah, I had cameras. But not facing the shed close enough to catch who did it. Smoke blurred everything. But I didn't need a name. We both knew who it was. Still, no proof. No arrest. That was when I stopped playing defense. After the fire, I kept waiting for Greg to make a mistake. I knew he did it. He knew I knew. But without a clear video or witness, I couldn't pin it on him. He laid low for a while. No more smug looks, no more late night sneaking around. His house lights stayed off most nights, like he wanted people to think he wasn't home. But he was. I saw his blinds shift when I walked by. Then one morning, a letter showed up in my mailbox. No stamp, no return address, just folded paper in a plain envelope. Inside was a typed note. You keep pushing, you'll regret it. Stay in your lane. No name, but again, it didn't need one. I filed a report with the cops. Showed them the note, the timeline, everything. They logged it, said they'd keep a closer eye on the area. But it was just more paperwork to them. To me, it was another line crossed. I figured if Greg wanted a war, fine. He could have won. So I hired a private investigator. I didn't want to be petty. I just wanted peace. But peace wasn't going to happen while this man lived next door, thinking he could do whatever he wanted. The investigator wasn't cheap, but he was sharp. Within a week, he had information. Greg was already on thin ice. 2 years ago, he'd been fined by a different HOA in Arizona for similar behavior: trash dumping, property damage, harassing neighbors. He sold his house and moved out before they could take it further. Moved here like a fresh start. He'd also been through a messy divorce that left him broke. Apparently, he'd been unemployed for a while and was living off the little he had left. No job. No friends. Just a big ego and too much time. That explained the trash dumping. Maybe it was about control. Maybe it was just about feeling superior to someone who had what he didn't. But then the PI dropped the real bomb. Greg was behind on his mortgage. Months behind. He was also behind on his HOA dues. And since he'd racked up the biggest fine ever issued in the neighborhood, the board had started a quiet process to lien his property. It wasn't public yet, but it was moving fast. If he didn't pay up, they could take his house. I didn't tell anyone. I sat on that info like a coiled spring. Then, out of nowhere, things took a turn. A new family moved into the house across from mine. Young couple, 2 kids, friendly. On move-in day, they were out front unloading boxes when Greg stormed over. I watched from my porch as he started yelling at them, something about blocking the street, making too much noise, disrespecting the neighborhood. The dad, maybe in his 30s, tried to calm him down, but Greg kept escalating. He actually knocked one of the moving boxes off the sidewalk. The new neighbor didn't back down. I heard the dad say, loud and clear, "You try that again, and I'll call the police. You don't scare me." Greg walked off, but not before pointing at the family security camera and muttering something under his breath. I waved at the dad later that evening. Told him, "You're not alone." That family? They had a high-end system, better cameras, better resolution, full motion sensors. Within 2 days, they caught Greg trying to key their SUV. The footage was crystal clear. Face, hands, everything. They handed it to the police. This time, Greg didn't get a warning. They brought him in. He was out within 24 hours, but that shook him. He stopped pretending. I saw him pacing in his driveway at night, talking to himself. He started putting up weird stuff in his windows: aluminum foil, old blankets. Like he thought people were watching him. The thing is, they were. The neighborhood had had enough. People were comparing footage, notes, HOA records. A neighbor 2 streets over said her bike tires were slashed last month. Another said her sprinkler system had been messed with. Greg's name kept coming up. Then came the night someone egged his house. Then toilet papered it. Not me. I don't play like that. But someone out there had run out of patience. The HOA board held an emergency meeting. They invited the whole neighborhood. It was standing room only. The president laid everything out: Greg's record, the police reports, the unpaid dues, the fine, the neighbor complaints. They voted to file the lien early, push for foreclosure, and file a cease and desist order for harassment. Greg showed up halfway through the meeting, red in the face, shouting that he was being targeted. He called it a witch hunt. Said we were all liars, sheep, part of some big conspiracy to force him out. No one said a word back. That silence? That was louder than anything. Greg stormed out, slamming the door so hard the room shook. Later that night, I looked out my window and saw him loading stuff into his car. He didn't leave. Not yet. But something told me the worst was still coming. Greg didn't sleep that night. I didn't either. His porch light stayed on till sunrise, and the pile of stuff in his car kept growing. Suitcases. Electronics. A duffel bag. Then he stopped loading, slammed his trunk shut, and just stood there in the driveway, staring at my house. Hands in his pockets. Not moving. I kept the doors locked and the lights on. I didn't feel safe. Not because I was scared of him, but because desperate people don't think straight, and Greg was running out of options. The next day, everything exploded. The HOA's lawyer showed up with a notice of lien and foreclosure filing. It was taped to his door. The board had moved fast, too fast maybe, but they weren't playing around anymore. Greg tore the paper off and screamed in the street. Not yelled, screamed. high-pitched, animal-like. People came out of their homes, phones in hand, just watching. He shouted about betrayal, sabotage, called us cowards hiding behind paperwork. Then he pointed at my house and yelled, "This is your fault." I didn't go outside. I stayed calm. But my phone was already recording through the window. He paced up and down the block for a while, muttering, like he was building up to something. Then he got into his car, peeled out of his driveway, and sped off. It felt like a storm passed. Quiet again, but not for long. 2 nights later, around 2 a.m., I woke up to a loud bang. Then another. Then glass shattering. He came back. Greg had driven his car straight into my front yard, right over the lawn, smashing through my garden and into the porch railing. The crash destroyed the steps and part of the porch support. My cameras caught it all, every second. He didn't try to run. When the cops arrived, he was still sitting in the driver's seat, gripping the wheel with both hands, staring straight ahead. There was no alcohol, no drugs, just rage. They arrested him on the spot. Reckless endangerment, property damage, trespassing, violating the restraining order that had been quietly filed after the last HOA meeting. And once he was booked, everything caught up to him: unpaid fines, HOA violations, now criminal charges. But the story didn't end with his arrest. Insurance covered some of the damage, but not all. The garden I worked on for years? Gone. Porch? Rebuilt. Peace of mind? Still working on it. But here's the part that I didn't expect. After he was gone, and the house sat empty waiting for bank action, I kept seeing signs that maybe I wasn't totally innocent in all of this either. I pushed back. I fought fire with fire. I made things public when I could have gone quiet. I played smart, but I also played cold. Maybe it was justice. Maybe it was revenge. Sometimes, it's hard to tell the difference when it feels good watching someone fall. One day, I opened the mailbox and found a final letter addressed to neighbor. No stamp, no return. Just a folded piece of paper, dirty around the edges. It said, "You win." But winning doesn't make you right. I never told anyone about that letter. I never told the HOA or the cops or the neighborhood. I burned it in the fire pit behind my rebuilt shed. Greg's house eventually got auctioned off. A retired couple moved in. Friendly people. Love gardening. The irony isn't lost on me. Every morning now, I sit on the porch, coffee in hand, and look at the spot where his car left tire marks on my lawn. Grass finally grew back. But sometimes I still see the scars. We both made mistakes. His were louder. Mine were quieter, buried in silence and small victories. But in the end, we both lost something. Greg lost his home, his name, his place here. And I lost a piece of peace I may never fully get back. But I sleep better now. Not because it's over, but because I didn't let him win.